Hello, kids, and welcome to another Sunday here for our junior church. And last week we talked about the writing on the wall and how Belshazzar was not following exactly what God wanted for him to do, and God took away his kingdom, took away the opportunity that he had. Today we're going to look into a new story here, and if you're there, I hope you enjoy hearing these stories, and I hope you're learning many, many things. So, Daniel chapter 6 is where we're going to be at. And we meet a new man, a new kingdom. His name is Darius, or Darius, however you want to say it. Darius is now the new kingdom, Darius, and he set up a bunch of people to help him out. He set up 120 princes. You can think of them as like people who represent you and people who will go before you. And then he set up three presidents, the Bible says, but also one of them being very important by the man of Daniel. And there's the reason why Daniel was put to be basically the second man. You have the king, think of the president, and think of Daniel as the vice president. Now Daniel, as we've looked at in previous weeks, wasn't even Egypt. He wasn't even Persian or Mede. He wasn't even Babylonian. He was a Jewish guy. But why did he become a very important part in their government? Well, verse 3, Daniel's chapter 6, verse 3, then as Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him. An excellent spirit. What do you think is an excellent spirit? What do you think that refers to? I think it refers to his faith in God. Actually, I don't think, I know. It refers to his trust in God. And that is a key thing for Christians, is that when you have an excellent spirit, it's to show that God is working in your life and you show it on the outside because of what he's done for you on the inside. Not just how some people like to say, oh, all the nice things, and, oh, I'm a Christian, yeah, and then they do all these wrong things, and they say other things about other people, and they do all these wrong things. No. Daniel had an excellent spirit in the fact that he genuinely trusted God. He served God no matter what was going on. That's what Daniel did. It wasn't just outside verbal stuff. He genuinely had a strong relationship with God. Never put down anybody. Never excluded people from anybody. Never tried to be the holier than thou, I'm better than you kind of attitude. He didn't have any of that. But you know what? These people got jealous. Verse 4 says they tried to find something against Daniel, but they couldn't. He was honest. He was just. And exactly what his demeanor was. He had an excellent spirit. They could not find him doing anything fault. They couldn't find him doing anything wrong in their own law or even in God's law. He was as honest could be. So they kept thinking about it. And so they tried to go against the law of his God. And they thought to themselves, well, he doesn't covet, he doesn't steal. Wait a minute. He prays to his God. And God requires people to pray to him, wants people to pray to him. I got it. This is what we're going to do. They come to the king. King Darius said, oh, king, we want you to feel even more important. So what we want to do is we want you to sign a law that says no one can pray or make a petition to any God for 30 days. God in heaven, any God, except for you, king, you can do it. But none of us will pray to any God for 30 days. And if someone does pray, we're going to cast them into the lion's den. And just to make sure that this is going to be true, when we sign it, we're going to put it as the law of the Medes and Persians, which basically means that no one can change the law. People can change the law today. It's called a repeal. But they would have to go through different ways to take out a law. And this happened a few times in the United States. The 18th Amendment was repealed with the 21st Amendment, with this idea called prohibition, where for a few years in our country's history, we didn't sell any alcohol legally. From 1918 to 1922, 21. But this was one of those things where no one can change it up. So the king's like, we should do it. So let's do it. So they did. Now Daniel's put in a spot where either he has to follow the law of man or he has to follow the law of God. If he doesn't pray to God, his relationship with God will suffer. But if he follows man's law, then he's neglecting that. But if he prays to God, then he's going to be in trouble with man. So we had an important choice that he had to make. So Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went to his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Why did Daniel have that excellent spirit? Because he was willing to go all out for God. It wasn't half-hearted. It wasn't 3/4. It was 100%. He knew that if he prayed, he could possibly die. But he was willing to do that. Why? Because he felt and he knew that his relationship with God was more important. Jesus would write later on in the New Testament that if the world hates you, it's hated me before it's hated you. So Daniel goes and he prays. And they found him praying. They said, ooh, we got him. Daniel, come with us. You have broken the law. So Daniel went. They brought him up to the king and said, oh, king, you remember you signed a law that said no one should pray to anybody except for you. Well, someone has. Who was it? And they looked around. Verse 13, they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, now they're throwing up his family heritage, they're throwing out he's a foreigner, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Not only has he broken the law once, he's done it 3 times, and he's done it every day. Time to send him off to the lions. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself. What does that mean? He was sad. The king was very, very sad. Because Daniel was his right-hand man. Daniel was the guy that the king put a lot of effort in to be able to keep him from not going insane. Daniel was the man who was honest, who kept everybody in line. Daniel had that excellent spirit. And because of that, Darius wanted to try to free him. But he was reminded he couldn't change the law. So, they took Daniel and they cast him into the lion's den. And the king spake and said to Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. What a statement from a guy who really didn't know much about God. But he saw Daniel's example, and he saw that he was going to be able to be saved. He knew that because of the faith that Daniel had in his God, that he was going to get saved, and that he was not going to die. So they sealed the den of lions so that way no one could sneak in, get it out. The king went to his palace. He didn't do much of anything. He slept. He fasted. He was worried. He kind of wasn't sure if Daniel was going to make it, but he was also saddened because of the fact that now he's lost his best guy. So the king gets up early in the morning. He went quickly, and he said, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God whom you serve continually able to deliver thee from the lions?" Now, he could have expected one of 2 answers. He could have expected to hear a voice, but maybe most likely He was expecting to hear nothing. I mean, there was a little glimmer of hope, but he wasn't too sure. And the Bible here in Daniel chapter 6, verse 20 says lamentable. The lamentable here has this idea of a sorrowful, as this crying, forgive me kind of voice. Like, I'm sorry, I hope God can save you. Verse 21, then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angels, shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me. Daniel realized that he was able to be saved. Realized that God was going to be able to help him through, and it did. The king was happy. So they took Daniel out, and the people who tried to get rid of Daniel, the conspirators who tried to put the law to get rid of Daniel, Darius cast them all into the den with their families, and lions had a good meal that day. So then Darius says, we ought to fear God. We ought to serve God. He is the living God. He's steadfast. His kingdom will not be destroyed. And Daniel was able to do well because of that. Now, what do we learn from this story today? Well, we learned two things. Number one, Daniel's faith was strong. Daniel was willing to do whatever it was because he did not want to disobey his God. And that's a challenge to us, that we should be able to do things to serve our God, no matter what the cost could be. And number two, when you try to go against God, you're going to fail. Almost like what we talked about last week. These guys tried to go against God. They tried to get Daniel gone. And what happened to them? Well, they were gone. They were lion's food. No one's going to take on a battle against God and win. But most importantly, even number three, there's a third idea that just came to my mind, is that you don't know what your testimony is going to do. Your influence is strong. It influenced this king, influenced this kingdom. And because of the fact that Daniel did that which was right, God blessed him and was able to help him do well, even in peoples in the land where it wasn't his own. It wasn't his native people. Thank you for watching this lesson today. And next week we'll be moving on into another book, into the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, because at this point, the new king that will come later on, Cyrus and Artaxerxes and Ahasuerus, they're going to allow the people of Israel to go back to their land and be able to do some things to fix it up after Nebuchadnezzar tore down a lot of things, tore down the temple, broke the walls down. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the next few weeks here. So I encourage you to tune back in next week. Until then, we'll see you then.